Thank you so much for joining. As Adele said, our first webinar of 2025, exciting. The power of play-based learning. So we are so happy to have Claire Medwell with us today. She's going to be discussing new strategies to make learning more effective, enjoyable and impactful for children of all ages. So a little bit about Claire. She's a freelance writer, early years teaching consultant and teacher trainer specialising in early years and primary English learners. And she's been living in Spain for 28 years. She's an author of many books, including Cambridge University Press Early Years Communication and Language series, and she's also the co-author of Cambridge Global English. She has won the English Language Union Award for Course Innovation for Dex the Dino. She's written some other books too, and in case you didn't realise, she is passionate about storytelling and English language. So over to you, Claire.
Okay, I'm just gonna, hello everyone. As I just share my screen, I'll just say hello from Spain. A very wet and drizzly Spain, I have to say. Unfortunately, it's not very warm here. I'm based near Madrid, so we get very, very cold weather in the winter. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me today on this session about power of play-based learning in the early years classroom. As Gail mentioned, I'm a early years specialist in second language, so probably slightly different context to yourselves, but at the same time in early years it's very, very relevant. So I'll be talking a lot about language development as well as a child's overall development in this session. So without further ado, play-based learning. Play-based learning has been gaining in momentum over recent years as a means to foster children's overall development in the early years classroom. So there's kind of like this, not to solely rely on traditional methods, but maybe to embrace play-based learning more because of the research that's coming out about it and how it really does help in children's overall development. So anyway, on today's agenda, we're going to look a little bit at the science of play. So why play is essential in the early years classroom. We'll look at some practical strategies, some that you may already use, but maybe some which might be new or give you more ideas for using tomorrow in your context, and how to implement play-based learning effectively, which is obviously something which teachers, certainly teachers without a lot of experience, may kind of doubt or be worried about how to implement play-based learning in the classroom. So why play? This might sound like a really obvious question, and I think all of you, if you're working in the early years environment, know that children love to play. It's how they make sense of the world around them. It's how they start out. So in terms of, I've just kind of chosen a few quotes which are kind of underlines the importance of play-based learning. So this impulse to play comes from a natural desire to understand the world. We see this, I think, in the children we teach. If you have children in your own, they're almost always mimicking the adult world and things we do. Another one from a sociologist, Abraham Maslow, is that almost all creativity includes purposeful play. And I think this is something I'd like to concentrate on today, that play is purposeful in the classroom. Play is just not just a means of playing, it's a means to overall development, whether it means their language skills, their social skills, their emotional skills, their behavioral skills, how they interact with their peers. This kind of purposeful in terms of how we can help children advance along their learning path. And then obviously Einstein, play is the highest form of research, and children do a lot of research through play. So first of all, I think this is crucial. When children first come into an early years environment, it might be their first time away from parents or their tutors, and it's an opportunity to develop social and emotional skills. They begin to share, they begin to interact with classmates as they play. Through that, it develops communication, cooperation, problem-solving skills. It means they take more risks. Cognitive skills. We're gonna back this up in a minute, but I just want to give you some of the kind of theory behind all this. So in terms of language and literacy, it really helps in this development, whether it be just mark making, they're you know, to support their emerging pre-literacy and pre-reading skills. It might be labeling. It might be making lists, commenting on picture books, you know, when the children in a reading area just begin to babble, turn the pages. Very importantly, I think children begin to think not only outside of the box. We want learners that are more independent, they can critique things, they can define things, but it's actually what they can do with a box. This is kind of purposeful play. It develops the cognitive skills. It improves literacy skills, listening skills, communication skills, and this kind of improves word association and how they can be used in different scenarios. I just talked about this. Imagine they're playing with geometric shapes. It helps them to learn the aspects of size, numbers, sequencing, classifying, and then this develops gross motor skills, how they use their body, and fine in terms of how they hand-eye communication and how they develop their fine motor skills. So play matters. We're going to have a look at some different types of play, but first of all, I'd just like to run through a couple of types of play. So in terms of a child from birth, they go through different phases. So this is from a sociologist called Mildred Parton, but the first type of play a child has from birth to 3 years is called unoccupied play. You know, when a child's like sitting in its pram and starts holding its leg and investigating its toes and its foot and its hands. This is all kind of like a type of play which is sensory play. So they're learning to be their body awareness. They're learning about their body. The next one is solitary play. We all see children when they just start looking at picture books or playing with blocks, and they do it on their own. That's solitary play. That could be anything from 3 months to 2 years old. Then onlooker play. So kind of children who aren't sure that they want to play with their peers yet. They'd rather just sit and watch, but they are watching and seeing what their classmates do. Then we have something called parallel play. So children could be side by side in a classroom, playing more or less the same thing, but they're not really interacting. They're not ready for that. Then we have associative play, where children begin to interact with their peers and maybe they start sharing things. It might be, oh, can I have that color? Can I have, and they're starting to become more sociable during this parallel play. So associative play is when they begin to share materials. And the last one is cooperative play, which could be anything from kind of 3 years to up to 5 years old, where they kind of work together to solve something. It could be a problem, or they could be working on, for example, a project together. So let's have a look at some of these types of play. First, it's child-initiated play. Now, this is something or free play, something which I'm sure many of you do, which is led and controlled exclusively by the child rather than by the adult. What can this do? If you provide a child with, for example, just a box with materials, whether it's full of fabric or strings or things from home, it could be a kitchen area where you're bringing in old boxes or pots and pans, wooden spoons. It allows children to be creative and spontaneous. So children will start kind of cooking their recipes or setting up their shop, for example. It promotes agency. Children can take the decisions on their own about their learning and where they're going to take this activity. It's also a chance to see what children's interests are. I think it's always nice, this kind of having a homeschool connection when children are very young. And before we build up like a portfolio about our learners, is say, what does your child like? It might be a child that really enjoys working with building blocks, or a child who really likes reading picture books. Hands-on learning. I think inevitably it's how children learn best, by doing, seeing, doing, and getting on with things. We've mentioned this before, that develops the ability to think outside of the box. Again, problem solvers. And very importantly, the idea of process opposed to outcome. So it's how they get to the end rather than just we need to get to the end. So this idea of what problems did I have to overcome to get to this final stage of my play? Okay, so let's have a look at some practical strategies. Now, one type of play is Symbolic play. So by symbolic play, I mean using items to symbolize something else. So a classic might be the girl with the banana. It's like, hello, how are you today? Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Or it could be, for example, I'm sure we all have lots of these cardboard tubes where you maybe well, children can decide what they want to do with the cardboard tube. They might want to paint it. We might make a instrument out of it. We might make a microphone out of it so that we can ask questions to our playmates, to our classmates. So it might be, again, to talk about the weather. So it might be, what's the weather like today? It's like, oh, it's very rainy here in Spain. So again, using everyday items to represent something else. So other ideas might be a classic, a big box, which can become a vehicle, or the class mascot's bed, or it could be a house, or it could be a pirate ship. So all these kind of ideas using fabrics, wool, string, tape, and allowing children to explore with them freely to see what they can make from the materials you provide them. What does this mean for you as the teacher? It means you're an observer, you're a monitor, you may be taking notes on how children are progressing in certain areas. So it may be something very, very creative and said, well, Claire made a beautiful microphone today out of the materials we gave her. Or it may be that someone really developed in their communication and how they interacted with their peers. So again, it's having your criteria and then ticking boxes if you have like your own curriculum, obviously in terms of early years. So symbolic play. Role playing again is another lovely way of play. Children love dressing up. Big dressing up boxes allow them to explore, see what they put on, see how they interact with their classmates as well. It could be I always have my favorite ever class mascot was my monkey. So for example, here we've got a little monkey. It could be at the doctor's and we just provide we could have little bandages. He's got one here on his arm. So it might be interacting together and say, oh, in terms of language, what's the matter today, monkey? I've hurt my arm. And children would put the different plasters. Here we've got plasters as well. And they can engage again in communication in a doctor or nurse role play and asking, what's the matter with your toy today? Oh, he's hurt his leg. Again, we're looking at vocabulary. They'll be able to like put little bandages on his legs. Also, you could have, oh dear, and this time you could have like, for example, little stickers, provide the children with stickers. So we've got little red spots and say, oh, he's not very well today. What's the matter? Oh, I've got like spots on my face today. So again, just providing all these materials so children can interact. Another one is a nature table. So obviously, if you have like an outside area, then just providing children with lots of leaves. We've got leaves here, bark, sticks, shells, twigs, and seeing what they can make from these natural materials. As teachers, we could go around and monitor. We can nudge them a little bit, perhaps if they're struggling with some of their creative expression. But again, encouraging them to play around with all the natural materials and to talk and share with their friends. I've got some examples here. So I'll call it transient art, because obviously transient is art when you have like a table with lots of different materials and children are allowed to just get on with what they want to make from it. Yeah, using all their being imagination, which children at the end of the day are incredibly good at. They tend to have incredibly good imaginations, which unfortunately some of us tend to lose as we get a little bit older, but children know their imaginations are limitless. So we really have to harness that. So here's an example of transient art where, for example, these were just like leaves from my garden. I thought, hey, well, this looks like I thought I was being quite imaginative with this one. My ivy leaf looked like had the ears of a dog, or it could be another animal. So again, getting children to explore other things with leaves, as simple as leaves could be fish, any kind of other animals. They may, in the other picture here, they maybe just make a flower out of the leaves as well. And also, as a teacher, when they're play-based learning, we'll look a little bit in implementing in a minute, but it's asking children kind of very open questions, not, oh, this is a dog, well done. It'd be more sort of like, tell me about Tell me about your picture. So you get kind of like a genuine response from children, getting children to genuinely think about why they actually chose to make, for example, a bumblebee out of the leaves, or why they chose this flower. They may say, because I like flowers, or I like I like the yellow leaves more than the green leaves. But again, encouraging them to be critical thinkers and to talk about why they like something, why they did something, or why they didn't like something even. So in order for us to implement a successful play-based program into our early years settings, then we do need these continuous provision areas, which I'm sure many of you have. Just a reminder of why we need them. Well, they could inside and out's great if we can have them. And also this idea of providing them with a whole range of opportunities for this free play, this child-initiated play. And in a minute, we'll look at more guided play where the teacher has a more inclusive role. And providing them opportunities which work towards learning objectives. What might an objective be? It might be, for example, here we've got children playing with Lego, or they could be playing with blocks. It could be talking about colours, for example. It could be looking at how can I build the biggest tower without it falling over. It could be categorising, sorting, for example. And also to have these areas to be accessible throughout the year, or to add to them if you're, for example, exploring a new topic with your class. Here's an example of some of the areas. So we've got like outside areas, which obviously have your play apparatus, your sandpit, water area, etc. Home areas, which may have places for children to lie down, calm area, home area with cooking utensils. Construction area or small play area where you may have small toys like plastic animals for them to interact with if they're learning about animals, maybe about farms, maybe they're in an excursion to a local farm and now they can explore it in the classroom. Role-playing area, which we talked about, with lots of dressing up clothes, opportunities, for example, to have like a toy picnic, for example, and a reading area, which I think's crucial in this in the early years environment. So if we look at guided play is something which would have an element of teacher support. By this, there'll be a clear learning objective. So for example, it might be talking about, for example, perhaps things they like. For example, let's take food. Yeah, it could be talking about food they like, fruit they like. It might be healthy eating. And you want children to start to cooperate. So it's kind of cooperative play where they're asking each other questions about what they like and don't like in terms of food. So this may involve the teacher setting up, modeling the play that you want the children to then engage with in their pairs or in their groups. So for example, the model might be, for example, I've got a plastic pear. It might be, so hands up who likes pears, or sit up or sit down if you like pears. Or if you use things like this, it may be like pick up your happy face or a sad face. So children can then experience the language. Do you like pears? Do you like ice creams? We made a little ice cream here. Stand up, sit down. I do, I don't. Sometimes I like it, or I like it on my birthday. So, and again, then they can categorize things into healthy food, unhealthy food. So again, this would be having an objective and children then having this degree of choice to talk about what they like or don't like and some kind of agency over their play. What might this mean? That if teachers are more involved, you may be able to extend the learning a little bit beyond what they might otherwise have achieved. So if you're talking about likes or dislikes, you then might want to ask the children, so what did you have for dinner last night? Or what's your favourite food? And get them to elaborate more as you monitor about their favourite type of food. So it's kind of giving more opportunities for active participation and self-reflection. But again, it can be this mix of free play and teacher guided play. So this is a big one. And I think this is a big one, is how to implement it. I think there's always the worry about like, is play purposeful, and how can we make it purposeful? I think as teachers, whether we're free or guided play, we also have an idea of where we want to go with it. So are we working on children's language and communication ability to converse, asking questions, answering questions, telling a story, for example, with objects they might have on a table? Or are we, for example, do we want them to see how they're developing socially and emotionally, how they interact with their classmates? Is it more of a overall development? You know, so we might say, oh, in your observations, you may say, for example, Lucia, taking a very popular Spanish friend, Lucia today wasn't a few weeks ago interacting very well with her partners, but today she really showed that she was able to answer the questions from her classmates. She was more collaborative. I could see her really advancing in terms of how she was using language in this subject area. So those kind of ideas. But I think the biggest thing for us is to create this safe and supported environment, providing with all the necessary resources that they need to be able to play effectively and purposefully. So having marking boards, crayons, paper materials, everyday objects, making available lots of natural materials, household objects, real life objects if possible. For example, we can plant seeds in the vegetable garden if that's possible, for role play as well. Having something like your friendly class mascots, whether you have one, two, or many in your classroom. In the second language classroom, I often use, for example, this monkey as the key person, not necessarily me, but who interacts and nudges children during play. So, for example, again, in an English context, it would just to be go up and, instead of me saying it, I'm a little bit of a clown at times, but I'd go up and say, oh, Max, would you like a little help from me on building your tower today? Because I have a really good idea to make a big base so it won't fall over this time. And again, the child immediately will interact with a puppet. Okay, let's make the big base bigger so the tower doesn't tumble, for example. So using puppets to interact. So it's like on a child's level to help them use language more and to make them more open when they communicate with their peers. So before we come to an end, in terms of play-based learning, just looking at some of the adjectives we'd use to describe it. It's actively engaging. It encourages all children to engage with their peers. Play is motivating. It's naturally motivating for children. So naturally, it's enjoyable. If we make it self-directed, it becomes really enriching for the children. It's creative. It's process-orientated. So it allows children to make mistakes. It allows them to take risks. It allows them to overcome problems and come to that final outcome. So it allows children to understand that taking risks is good. Making mistakes is not a bad thing. We learn from them. And structured play allows children to go beyond what traditional, let's say traditional early years programs and methods might allow us. It's meaningful, it's interactive, and it's collaborative. And also, I think we need to think that play drives curiosity, yeah? And curiosity drives discovery. And I think if within play, I think play-based learning, I think we can either embrace it wholeheartedly, we can incorporate a play-based learning into our early years classroom. There are many schools and there's many schools you can have a look at play-based learning examples where they'll talk about their success stories. They'll talk about some of the challenges they might have had if it's a fully integrated play-based learning, or this kind of blended approach where you may blend the play-based learning with a more traditional approach to it. I think as well, get parents on board, because if you get parents on board to a play-based learning, make sure they know the topics that the children are exploring in this play-based approach. Suggest ideas that they could use at home to help consolidate the learning in the early years classroom, and having parents on board will then make them great advocates of play-based learning. So the benefits range from improved cognitive abilities, problem-solving skills, and enhanced social and emotional development. I'm just showing you now, well, I've left my contact here, but Cambridge's Early Years, which I think was published, it came out last year, where there's been many of us collaborating on it, is a fully integrated early years programme, but also provides a curriculum. So each stage of this play, you kind of have a curriculum where you can see, in this instance, for example, children are learning to communicate with one another, to ask questions, and ask the questions, for example, using why or what or how much. So again, it allows us as teachers to feel like more confident that play is purposeful and we're still moving to academic outcomes, if you like, and to prepare them for their learning path ahead. So I hope, although it's been quite brief, I hope there's been some useful information or some ideas you can take away. And thank you so much for joining me today. I'll hand you over back to Adele and to Gail.
Thank you so much, Claire. My goodness, I was literally fixated to the screen. I think it's your energy as well, and your passion certainly comes across. So thank you so much. Just leading on to what you just said there, one of the questions we've had is, what simple play-based learning activities can parents try at home, and how can we encourage meaningful play at home to complement with children's learning, what they're learning at the nursery?
So, for example, one of them, I was thinking today, well, there's a couple. So one of them, seeing as we've been talking about food, I think it's really important to have that homeschool connection, is to suggest, for example, that when they are cooking, you talk about food. For example, when you've got a fruit bowl, let's talk about what's in it. Let's describe it. Let's use descriptive language, encouraging children to say, so, do you like tomato? Why don't we like tomatoes? It may be children like, well, I don't like tomatoes because it tastes, again, looking at exploring their language, because it tastes, I don't know. Well, in England, tomatoes are not sweet, are they? So it might be because they're not sweet. Whereas in Spain, we might say because tomatoes are so sweet and they're lovely and they're delicious. It might be, what's your favorite fruit? Talking about, so encouraging parents, it's very, very similar. Just say parents at the end of the day, when you go home, talk about the fruit, maybe talk about what you're cooking, encourage them to make a cake with you, talk about the utensils you're using. Simple things like that. If you have a class, I always love like the mascot's travels. So sending the class mascot home in a nice bag with a big kind of scrapbook type. Scrapbook. I used it in the early years. So parents could talk about what they're doing, take a picture of their child doing it if they'd like to put in, reading a book with the class mascot at home on a theme that they've been studying. For example, it could be the traditional hungry caterpillar, for example, all related to the same theme. Simple ideas.
Love that. Yes.
There's a few.
I can hear you, Lisa. I think you can sit here all day and tell us ideas of that, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. We've got quite a few questions, but I'm going to try and quickly just how can you balance child-initiated play with guided play to meet the early years? And that's the thing, isn't it? The curriculum is so specific, and you want to kind of make a balance. Any suggestions around that?
I would personally, I believe in both of them. I think there are moments for children to just be allowed to be creative, where we focus on different things. At the same time, I think it's just having your criteria. I think you have to have clear criteria. So if we're looking at a child's physical development, their social, emotional development, we can concentrate that on one day while they're doing free play. I think free play is an ideal time to comment on how a child is progressing, whether it be through their motor skills, their fine motor skills, they're beginning to, you can see pre-literacy skills emerging. Their mark making is now turning into small letters, for example, in the case of some very early years children. And then mixing it with the teacher-led when you want to take it that step further. And it's perhaps there that because you need to meet a very specific learning outcome. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. I like this question.
You're still showing your screen, just to let you know.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. I must stop sharing. Sorry.
Thanks, Gail. Yeah. Okay, so how does play contribute to cognitive skills such as problem solving, critical thinking and literacy?
So in terms of cognitive skills, all, in my opinion, all of them, problem solving. Let's imagine children are given, we talked about having a box of just materials to see what they're going to make from it, whether it's your cardboard boxes, where it's these, whether it's pom-poms, to see what they're going to make together. You could ask children to say, I'd like you to make, so here's one, say, like, I'd like you to make a toy, for example, or I'd like you to make design an animal from these materials, or I'd like you to design a magic wand, or I'd like you to do a pirate ship, yeah, but working together. Now, as those children are working together, and this would be cooperative play, they have to decide which materials to use between them. That's choice, that's agency. They need to come to an agreement. Perhaps something doesn't work in their idea. So again, there's a problem. How are they going to overcome it? It may mean that teacher has to come and nudge them and say, oh, perhaps, you need to add something to make this project work. So again, this is curiosity. This is using their imagination. This is using their hands. This is using the materials. So cognitively, all of them, that would be problem solving skills, their social skills, their motor skills. Again,
Okay.
it would depend on the particular project, but yeah, I think play offers it all, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's important that, obviously we deal with a lot of early year settings, and
Yeah.
because sometimes people can get so fixated about the curriculum, you forget actually that the children just play, and actually with play their development will grow in any case. But it's like you say, with some guided, efforts from the practitioners. Okay, what are your top recommendations for settings for setting up an effective play-based learning environment for both indoors and outdoors? I think you've covered some of that, to be fair.
Yeah, I think we did, but we can recap some and maybe look at a few more examples. So outside space, obviously, most early years will have their play apparatus, etc. Obviously, to develop the gross motor skills, the physical body. If your context allows you to have like vegetable gardens, obviously sand pits, for example, water areas where children can explore with water, with earth, get a little bit in a mess. Then maybe a water area in your classroom, for example, if you're working with, I always love the one where it's so simple, where you're working with like colors and allow children to like color mix. So you'd have like little glasses, transparent glasses, and like the paper, crepe paper. And so it's like, oh, let's see what happens if you mix like yellow with blue, and children, oh my gosh, I've got green. And, this kind of experiments, which are very simple and easy to kind of put into practice when they're exploring colors. And then print-rich environments. I think at this age, we're working with children who are unable to read and write at this stage, but we are working on all these emerging literacy skills. Books, labels, children need to see words, so perhaps they can label it themselves initially, where they're just trying to mimic, mark make, and next to it you could put the proper label. Lots of print in a classroom, lots of colors. Obviously early years, that's what early years is. It's colorful, it's bright, it's enticing, it encourages creativity, it motivates children. Reading areas, home areas, what other ones? Oh, construction areas, small world areas. So you might have little small toys. You may have cuddly toys, a big box with all the favorite cuddly toys. Encourage them as well. Children can bring in, for example, you can have a favorite toy day. Encourage them to bring their favorite toy. And again, in play, they could talk about, what its name is, what their toy likes doing. They could describe it. Lots of opportunities to develop their communication skills as well.
Yeah.
So there's a few.
No, that's great. You mentioned a lot of tools to use. One of the things you didn't mention, and that's one of the questions, is how can digital tools or technology play a part in this, and can it complement traditional play-based learning?
Absolutely. I mean, digital, since it's been in the classrooms, it's always had a place, and it always will have. I think when it comes to like digital for me is often a way of consolidating and also checking that children are reaching these you know, have we achieved this? For example, if I'm looking at language in my setting, it may be that it's an online game where children have to sort and sequence stuff. So it may be like be sorting, imagine we're talking about different kinds of animals. It may be sorting into pets and wild animals, for example. They may know the names. And I think, I've reached we've managed this, and we may have done lots of play beforehand. It has its place, but I don't think it can have, I mean, all research has showed, I mean, many, because I work with books, just to quote this, when the digital whiteboards first came in, there was a huge study in Los Angeles. It was the first state in America to go totally digital. And this was in early years, it was in primary, etc., totally digital, no book at all. And what they discovered is children don't just want screen time all the time. We often think that they do, but not at all. Children wanted to do other things. Children also wanted to have a look at books. Children still do like books, and they like to do things on paper. So that's why I think we have to have all these opportunities in the early years and beyond, whether it be on paper, digital, play. We have to embrace it all and create this blended learning environment so we can help children along their learning path.
Okay. Let me just see which ones you haven't answered already. Okay, so this is a question from Patricia about their team. How can we train our team to teach effectively through? Sometimes you want to get too involved, isn't it? So how can you kind of train your staff how to implement guided, play without taking over? So you're not really driving it, but you're giving the children a chance to be able to develop and have that creativity themselves. Any suggestions about training for staff?
In terms of training, I mean, obviously it would depend completely on your centre. It would depend completely on the time available to do training as well. Obviously, I've worked in the language sector, and one of the many years ago, one of the best places I worked in for young learners was because every Friday morning we'd have a training session, and it was generally delivered by obviously more experienced staff, and we'd be looking at particular topics. So, for example, it might be someone who's researched more child-initiated play, looking at your curriculum, looking at the learning objectives and how you can use the different ideas for play can help progress towards these learning objectives. It may be something on, in early years, it may be, you have storytelling session. How can we explore storytelling techniques? How can we be better storytellers? How can we engage children more in a storytelling environment? Anything from drama to, but I think it does require, sure, if it's your centre, it does, of course, it's going to require this extra effort, but obviously it's your centre and you want your staff to have. I always think this kind of continual idea of training and inputting ideas, the kind of thing we're doing now. I mean, I often join webinar sessions and think, yeah, I never thought about that. And if I come out with one or two ideas that I'd forgotten about or I'd never used, I think, great, I can use that tomorrow. And I've gained more knowledge and practical ideas for use in my early years setting. But I think this ongoing development in some way or some form is obviously probably once a week's not viable. It would just depend on your setting, but is essential. Or observation, if you can observe as well and help in a colleague's class as well. I think that's always really, really valuable.
So like observations and stuff to be able to
observation. I think observation, I don't really like the word observation because I think when I was observed, I kind of prefer to call it like collaboration. So perhaps the main teacher might say, today we're going to be concentrating on this particular point. So we might be talking, imagine, let's go to storytelling. You might say, look, we've provided the children, we've talked about for a story, it might be, I don't know, for example, because I love stories. So for example, this book. So this is going to follow. So for example, we've got In the City, So this is all a story about vehicles in a city. It's all about how people get up and how they go to work. It's very, very relevant it's all, geometric shapes. Sorry, I've got everything falling out of this. So for example, something like this, so you can see like there's ambulances, there's helicopters, so it maybe talk about vehicles, So imagine if you want the children to extend this and to talk about vehicles themselves. So you may have little cars, they may have drawn their favorite type of transport. And it might be that a colleague goes in and you could say, I'm going to work on how children put together their own simple story. It could be about how they get to school in the morning. You know, mummy takes me in the car, daddy takes me in the car, whatever. I walk to school. It might be what they see when they walk to school. And it could be observing how children storytell, how they interact, and it kind of like collaborating. And one teacher can like nudge the children a little bit and, oh, tell me about what you see when you're driving to school in the car in the morning. That's just one thing that's stemming from storytelling.
That's amazing. I tell you what, when you start talking, I think if I was a child in your lessons, I definitely will be very engaged.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you.
I think I've just quickly scanned through the other questions. It seems like you've answered most of that, but I quickly wanted to ask everybody if they have any questions. You can put yourself off on mute, and if you wanted to ask something, if you've got any questions, don't be shy. This is an hour we can all spend together as practitioners to be able to learn. No? Okay, I will then just say then, thanks so much everyone for joining. And Claire, oh my goodness, this has been fantastic. We've got a next webinar on the 18th of February. Please do register for that one. That one is all about improving children's learning and well-being. And that's on the 18th. And when you get this webinar recording, there will be a link for you to register for the next one already. But everybody that has joined today, thanks for giving up your time. And Claire, like I say, I just want to say thank you. It's been probably one of my favorites so far, and I've done this for many years now since COVID. Was great to started doing these webinars to try and support the earlier sector. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
No worries. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks so much.
Great. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.